Hey, everybody, testing, testing, one, two, three. Hi. Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, I'm coming through okay? Hi, Doug. I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, yeah, I can hear you. Just getting a tiny little bit of static, but I think we'll be okay. Welcome to the Georgia Convention. I hope everyone's having a great time. I hope that all of the intended speakers came. I think I can see there Jeff Tucker. Hey, Jeff. How's it going? Hope you're doing well. Listen, little secret about Jeff. To the guy who's sitting next to him, just tickle his ear, like right here, just a little bit. It's really cool. His bow tie spins, but don't go too fast because we don't want a fire or anything. But it's a really cool trick that his bow tie does. So anyway, I guess on with the speech. I hope that you're doing well. I wanted to talk about a real problem, a central problem that libertarians and other freedom advocates face, which is responding to the problem of market failure. And this is, the great issue of the roads and the lighthouses. And I just got an email recently about how you're going to have streetlights in a free society. And I really wanted to talk about that. It's a completely absurd idea to begin with, to say that if something doesn't work voluntarily, that we have to have a centralized agency of infinite violence to solve the problem. So, I mean, to see the absurdity of statism of this kind of approach, just take it to some other field and then take it, imagine. So I'm going to a bunch of investors and I'm saying, I've got this great libertarian dating site. Libertarianism, a bit of a sausage fest at times, but I got a great idea for a libertarian dating site. We guarantee dates for libertarians. And of course, the investors will say, well, wait a second. What if the libertarian can't get a date through your website? I said, no, we put that under the category of market failure. And what we do is we drive up in a windowless van to some woman, we chloroform her, we put her in the back of the van, and we deliver her to the libertarian. You can't lose. It's perfect. And they'd say, that's insane. They wouldn't say, that's an interesting way to solve the problem of market failure. They'd say, no, that's completely insane. You can't do that. And if voluntarism doesn't work, there's not a backup plan called let's give a small group of people all the guns in the world and that will make everything, and then we solve the problem. It really, really doesn't work. It's like invoking divine favor to solve a math problem. I don't believe that there's hand of Jesus solves my equation and therefore I should get an A. It doesn't really work in a math department, and magical thinking and morality does not solve the problem of voluntarism. So let's talk a little bit about market failure and some steps that I think are ways that you can get people to look at this issue or question anew. So market failure is, we all know the ones we've heard about: roads, national defense, education for the poor, or whatever it is, right? So a place where voluntarism, the voluntary free market trade, is considered to be doesn't work. And so then there's this magical entity called the state, the laws, the regulations, the bureaucracy, or something like that, supposed to move in and solve the problem of market failure. So this is also related to the problem of the commons. I'm sure you all know this. I'll just touch on it briefly. The problem of the commons is you've got a bunch of farmers all around an area of common land, and if they each let their flock of sheep graze on the common land, then they get the benefit of the sheep grazing there, but they don't suffer the cost because it's held in common. And this is the problem of the commons. Everyone has a rational incentive to overgraze, but if everybody follows their own rational incentive, then you end up in a situation where the common land is outgrazed and everybody loses the resource and so on. The idea that you set up a government to solve the problem of the commons is completely insane, because there's no agency more subject, no organization more subject to the problem of the commons than the state. It's madness. So collective non-ownership and a lack of moral hazard, you don't suffer the negative consequences of your own choices immediately. So collective non-ownership and a lack of moral hazard is supposed to be solved by the government. The government is defined as collective non-ownership and a lack of moral hazard, right? How many politicians are going to be personally responsible for the national debt they create? Is George Bush going to get a bill for the Iraq war? No. I mean, government is free evil everywhere you look. That's the big sign, the big slogan. The only bumper sticker the government needs is, climb on board, we've got free evil. Yay! So the idea that you're going to solve the problem of the commons by creating an agency that is the most subject to the problem of commons that you can conceivably imagine is like trying to cure a hangnail with a nuclear bomb. I guess in a way you kind of made the problem go away, but you also made a subcontinent go away too, and that's not really what we're looking for. So, another problem that people have when they're talking about the problem of the commons is they think, sorry, let me let me rephrase that. Think may not be the right word. They assume, us, you, me, they assume that a free society is going to reproduce whatever the state has at this time in some similar or the same manner. So look at the national system of interstate highways in the US under Eisenhower. You know, billions and billions of dollars borrowed. You pass the buck down to future generations. Again, problem of the commons. Statism is the problem of the commons. You build all of these huge highways, and that creates massive changes in how people live, how they work, how food gets transported. The whole system of urban, suburban, and rural gets completely reconfigured because, hey, free roads paved on with the blood of the unborn. And so then people say, okay, well, if you have this road system that was created through debt, through coercion, through statism, so if we then transfer this entire system to the free market, how will the free market support and fund this existing statist system? And the answer is it won't. Because once people start having to pay directly for roads, then they're going to change the decisions that they make about where they live, about whether they eat food locally or have it shipped in from elsewhere. They're going to make decisions about cars, fuel efficiency. Everything is going to change once people start being charged for their actual road consumption and the actual wear and tear on the roads, depending on the age of the roads and so on. So people make decisions, different decisions. When you privatize something, you don't just the market doesn't find a way to reproduce exactly what it was like under statism, because it's no longer under statism. It's completely different. If you build a bridge on the moon and then you take it to the Earth, it's going to collapse because it was built for 1/6 the gravity. So when you transfer something to a new environment, it changes. It has to fundamentally alter its structure. So that's an important thing. So how will roads be paid for in a free society? The first thing is to say, well, roads won't look like they do right now under statism. How will education be paid for in a free society? Well, it ain't going to look like it looks right now, because everything that violence touches turns to stone. It freezes. That is the Medusa glare of the state. So 150 years ago, you had 20 kids, 30 kids stuffed in a bunch of dull rows with a teacher up front squeaking away on a blackboard. And now 150 years later, after the state took it over, what amazing revolutions have taken place in the field of education, right? Now that we have audio and video and the internet and teleconferencing and work at home and iPads, what has changed? The blackboard has sometimes become a whiteboard. That's really all I can think of that fundamentally has changed, because statism freezes things in time. It stops progress because vested interests vie for stability, and stability in most human realms simply means a kind of living death, particularly in education. So no, the answer is not going to look anything like it looks under statism when you have a free society. So that's the first thing, to disabuse people of that notion. So here are seven, count them, 7 conditions that I think a problem needs to fulfill in order to qualify as market failure. Number 1, there must be sufficient demand to drive resource allocation. So if you're the only guy in the whole world who has a pimple, you obviously would like zit ointment, pimple ointment. And yet you're the only guy in the world who has one pimple, so there's not going to be a whole bunch of companies vying for your business, because maybe you're going to spend $5 on some zit cream. Therefore, there's not market failure, there's just not enough of a demand for a zit cream to make people produce it. That's not market failure, that's simply a lack of demand. Now, of course, you're going to start lobbying for zit cream and all that, but anyway. 2, the price of whatever the market is supposed to deliver must be something that people are willing and able to pay. And this is important. The willingness to pay is interesting in economics, because it doesn't actually have much to do sometimes with exact value, right? So, I mean, I was a waiter in my teens for many years. And I mean, that's a crazy business model. I mean, imagine if it didn't exist. Again, you go to some investors and say, I got an idea for a restaurant. We are going to pay our waiters almost nothing. Almost nothing. And that's going to save us money. But the reason that the waiters are going to get paid more is that people are going to leave cash. The customers are going to leave cash or put it on their credit card or debit card. Cash for the waiters. They're going to subsidize the waiters of their own free will. Are you crazy? Are you going to say that you're not? It's like saying you're not going to pay your factory line workers much because the people who buy the car are going to leave a couple of $1,000 tip, which is then going to be distributed to the line workers. It would make no sense, but it works. It works. I had some cheap customers for many years as a waiter. I never had anybody who stiffed me completely. And these are people just passing through, people in tourist towns. They're never coming back or not for many years. So it works. There's a way. So if people are even remotely willing they want to pay for it, they're able to pay for it, then it can't qualify as market failure. The solution must be physically possible. It must be physically possible. Again, this sort of doesn't need to often be said, but you will sometimes have situations put forward which would not be physically possible. Number 4, and importantly, the solution cannot be currently banned by the state. You can't say that it's market failure for people to produce cheap education if cheap education is currently banned by the state. If it's banned by the state, you cannot claim that it's market failure if people aren't providing it. Number 5, the solution, the current solution, cannot be currently enforced or protected by the state. By the state. Is it market failure that there's so many unemployed people in America at the moment? No, it's not market failure that there's so many people unemployed in the US, because employment is banned, is restricted. People who want to work for less than minimum wage, can't get a job. People who want to do trades, who don't want to join a union, can't get a job. People who want to open a school without licenses, people who want to do hot dog stands without licenses. People who want to sell lemonade on their front lawn without licenses. It goes on and on. People are simply not allowed to have jobs. So where the state is violently interfering with the free operation of the free market, it cannot be called market failure. The solution can never, and to qualify as market failure, the solution can never have been provided in the past by the free market. So people say, well, how would you get roads? Well, of course, if you go back in history, as boring, pedantic libertarians like myself are wont to do, if you go back in history, you find that the roads were originally in the US and in other countries all over the world were provided by private enterprise, were provided by companies who charged tolls and so on. Maybe they relied on tips, but as far as I've been able to research, they relied on tolls. Railroads originally provided by tolls and private free market enterprises, and of course were much more efficient than this. I think as Tom DeLorenzo points out, that the government railroads had to make all these political stops, right, to get donations from people who wanted to be on the railroad line, so they were just like a bunch of, it was like a planned by upending a bowl of spaghetti on a shaking corrugated piece of cardboard, whereas the free market railroads went pretty directly and efficiently. And so if the solution was at one point provided by the free market, but then was taken over by the state, as these things are wont to do, then you can't say that it's market failure. The government just took it over. Government just took it over. And last but not least, it has to be kind of an important good or service. If it's pretty unimportant, and let's say you can pass all of these, get through all of these hoops, and it's something that's pretty unimportant, then it doesn't really qualify for me as market failure. That would result in a state intervention. Because if it's just something inconsequential, 5 guys don't have zit cream, then to create a monolithic agency of monopoly violence with the ability to strip property at will, start wars, create counterfeit currency, sell off generations of the unborn through national debt. That's not a good solution to a relatively unimportant problem. So, demand, of course, is signaled by price. I mean, fundamentally, in a free market. And people want things for other than just pure economic value. I mean, there's some stuff that people buy for economic value. Nobody buys stocks and IBMs because they look good on the wall, because they want them to increase in value. But, you know, people don't buy tattoos to increase their resale value on the sex trade market. What they do is they have a penchant for self-adornment or self-decoration, and that's why they do that. So do people want to get back to streetlights? Do people want neighborhoods that are well lit and so on? Well, yeah. I mean, and they may want them for aesthetic reasons. They also may want them for specific economic calculation reasons, probably a mix of both. But if having a well-lit neighborhood increases the value of your house, then it's like landscaping. You know, you put the money in and you reap the reward when you sell it. It's an investment, and therefore it will be provided. When people are building new homes, they will, like new home neighborhoods and so on, they'll figure out, am I able to get more value out of putting streetlights in, and people will pay for it more because the streets will be lit. Their kids won't be blundering around in the darkness on their bikes with cars around. So yeah, you'll just look into that. And if it's economically valuable, if people are willing to pay extra for it, then of course it's going to be provided. And so the last point I wanted to make, I'm going to be the shocking libertarian speaker who comes in remotely on time. The shocking point that I wanted to make was really to focus on people who claim that they found some sort of market failure that requires X, Y, and Z from the state. You know, it takes a fair set of cojones to say that a problem is unsolvable by all of the future combined genius of billions of human beings who are who may be highly motivated to solve the problem. All the entrepreneurs in the world from here to eternity to the end of time are going to be unable to solve this problem. I mean, you could make a case, I don't know, 1970. How are we going to charge for road use? I don't know. We're going to have spotters. I mean, you know, you're not going to think of electronic tolls. You're not going to think of cameras that can automatically read your license plate and bill you at home. You're not going to think of GPSs that can record where you're going. You're not going to think of 3G, 4G, instant wireless tracking of everybody on the planet. And so if you in 1970 say, well, we can't charge for road use, then within a couple of decades, you're going to be proven completely wrong. And this is, you know, when people say, well, I don't know how you can charge for geographical defense. I don't know how the environment is going to be protected. I don't know how fishing rights are going to be enforced. Well, these things are physically possible. Who knows what technology is going to be available in the future? Who knows what geniuses are going to come up with radical and wild and brilliant solutions? So if somebody is going to say, not only can I not think of a solution now, not only is there no solution now, but there never will be a solution in the free market, that's somebody who I think has fallen prey to a kind of irrational megalomania of narcissistic intellectual vanity that I think it's probably pretty wise to hit the eject button on that kind of relationship. Somebody who's that grandiose, who says, well, I can't think of how it can be done. Nobody that I know of and nobody I've read about, because I've read all the books in the world, I don't know how it can be done. And I don't think anyone will ever be able to figure it out. Well, I think that's not a very good position. I mean, I don't know how to write a hit song. That doesn't mean that when I turn on the radio, all I hear is static. It's just kind of mad. So this, you know, I think intelligent libertarian economic arguments is really an appeal to humility. Just because you don't know or I don't know doesn't mean that it can never be solved by any human being in the known universe at any point ever in time. So I hope that these have been sort of helpful to you. I'll put a link on my message board with this essay in case you want to look into it further. I would certainly recommend it. It's a very, very important problem. It doesn't really matter. Fundamentally, it's a moral issue around the non-initiation of force. But if you do get these questions about market failure, I think that these are some pretty good good tips. And thank you so much for the invitation to have a chat. I think that you may have figured out by now that this is not live, but we'll see. And have yourselves a great, great convention. And thanks to Doug and the other organizers for inviting me along. Mwah! I hope you have a great day.